because you've only started the Red Sox season.
It's early. Let's not go down on them already.
Paul's not here.
Who was it?
Paul.
I think it's the nature of the losses that is most disturbing.
Perhaps, yeah.
Giving up. Holds on at the ledge.
Fall into their stride. All right, 6:30. All right, so we'll call to order the organizational meeting of the Rollins Spring Clinic. I will be filling in for Mrs. Knowles, the ex officio for the select board. She is recovering and she'll be back next month. So, I mean, not next month, your next meeting. So the first order of business, and then whoever is chair that's all your meeting, I can be quiet, is the election of officers. So you need to elect a chair. So nominations for chair are in order. See what's
I'd like to nominate John Corcoran to chair the budget committee. Also commend him for what
Hold
he
on a
did.
second, hold on.
Second?
It's been moved, seconded by Kim St. Clair. There you go.
Well, just to thank him when he stepped in last year when really nobody would do it. And he did it as a new budget committee member, never having been a member, never having been a chair, and they had been previous chairs in the committee. So I commend him for his work, and I think he at least deserves the satisfaction of being able to do as an experienced chair.
Are there,
That's a nice way.
thank you for saying that. Are there, but hold on, are there any other nominations for chair? All right, seeing none, we will close nominations. All those in favor of John Ordway serving as the budget committee chair for 2019, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. It's all yours now, John.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to do it.
And thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, it was a good experience. I think I can do it more efficiently this time, so I won't be working at home quite as much, hopefully. So I think the next order of business is to elect a vice chair. So do I get any nominations for vice chair?
I'll nominate Suzanne.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? We ready to,
She likes her spreadsheets, so.
you willing to be vice chair?
Oh, yeah.
It suits me, fine. So, all in favor of Suzanne Ewart being vice chair of the budget committee for this season? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You guys have it. Suzanne, your chair, vice chair. I'm not going to. Okay,
I'm wishing a very long life.
yes.
And a nice healthy year.
Yes, me too. So with that, I didn't put together this agenda, but I see representatives to the Rollinsford School District's withdrawal committee, so I'm not sure what that, do we need to bring some, is that?
I
Are
can
you
speak
bring
to
that
that a
forward?
little bit.
Thank
So
you.
this was the warrant that passed to form a committee to study the feasibility of withdrawing from SAU 56. And according to the RSA, this committee will be 2 school board members, 4 community members, the superintendent, and a representative from the budget committee. I can tell you that our first meeting is May 1st, which is a Wednesday at 6:30. And we're hoping to be efficient, maybe have 1 or 2 meetings a month until about January, at which point we'll hope to have most of the information gathered, and then the meetings after that leading up to the vote should be fewer. That's kind of the background information.
Does anybody want to volunteer?
I think, personally, I think we should fill our vacancy because that person could be considered for that committee as well.
Actually, what I had thought of is that because, well, I don't know who's available and wants to come forward and be as, so we have a vacancy. If I know Bill Irving resigned one year before the end of his term, so we have a vacancy that we need to fill. What I would like, we did this last year and felt it was kind of rushed because I didn't really feel I had a chance to understand who we were appointing. It's our duty as the budget committee to appoint somebody. It's not an elected position. So as a duty to appoint, I'd like to know who the candidates are who are interested in it, and why they're interested, and what they can bring to the committee. So what I would suggest is that we table the selection of the next replacement until the next meeting. In the meantime, have the town advertise that there is this opening, and have people come forward, indicate their interest in it, and in the next meeting, we can discuss it and evaluate and select. That's an approach that I suggest would make me more comfortable than the last time. And I think there are folks who are available to do it, but not everybody in the committee necessarily knows who they are or what they bring. So that's
Mr. Chairman.
Bert.
Bert Crozier, Wallingford Water and Sewer District. By tradition, and it goes back a long time, the next person in the previous election cycle who came in next was generally appointed.
Yeah,
That was the tradition.
that's tradition, that's not law.
I understand.
And by my understanding, that tradition wasn't followed a couple of years ago. And so I'd rather we go through a process of selecting based on, we're making an appointment, it's our decision. I'd like to know who's available to do it and vote on it and do it that way.
I support that. I know that the select board has filled a vacancy that way recently. I think the school board has as well. And it makes sense. People who might not have been available in January now find themselves available, willing to serve. It would be nice to know who they are. So,
Kim?
So I'm with Mr. Crozier for years. I mean, that's been our processes, because those people ran and they were elected by the voters. We always felt that it made sense to honor with the people that the voters chose and go back to the ballot.
I'd say the ballot chose the three top vote getters.
they were not elected yet,
They
but
weren't elected.
No, they were elected. So if we change it, well, so this is one of the things that we should probably consider is, we change this process. We should really put it in our guidelines, because there is no process around this, and we've always gone back to the ballot. So now we're suggesting changing that. I also want to know if there's going to be an interview process, and if the whole board is going to interview the candidates, and are we going to vote on the candidates? So how would that work?
That's how I would see it, is that we would all get to hear who's available, understand what their interest is, what they bring to the committee, and then we would vote on it, yeah.
So why would you not consider the people who ran?
Well, they would, if they're interested, they could come forward and put their names
They
in.
just wouldn't have a priority.
Right, it would be the selection of the committee, and maybe that's the way everybody has their preference for voting. If your preference is to take the next highest vote getter, that's fine, that's how you can vote. I think, but just to be clear, 3 people were elected, and they're here. The next 3 people on the list did not get elected, but we can appoint them. So I don't think we have to honor the election. I don't think that's because somebody, and I'm just saying out of principle, just because somebody is interested and wants to be on it doesn't, and they ran, doesn't mean that they're the best selection to do it.
So you're saying you don't really think we have responsibility to the candidates who ran?
No. I think the election's over.
I agree with that. It's the budget committee, the RSA, municipalities where members are at large are elected, vacancies will be filled by appointment by the budget committee. So that's us. And it's up to us to choose a person that we think best fits the needs of the budget committee.
And it may very well be that next
Yeah, it
vote
could.
getter.
Yeah.
And I'm just,
Well, I think, just for what it's worth, your point about people who didn't register to run in January might be available now. and this will give an opportunity for them to come forward. There may not be anybody who's gonna come forward, but I know I just made it in under the wire, all right, and I might have missed the opportunity had it been a week earlier. So, there could be people out there, I don't know of anybody, but your point is well made on that.
And that's how we handle the vacancies on the select board. I mean, it's part of it seems to make sense to cast a wide net, and I think you're right, that the next most qualified person submits their name is the person that was the runner-up. And you all want, I won't be voting, it'll be the actual ex officio, but I would imagine, I can't imagine I won't be, maybe she won't be back, but it makes sense to me to do it that way. I mean, the other night we had vacancies on a number of committees in town, and traditional appointments that usually made at town meeting. We could have, by the warrant that passed, just appointed whoever we wanted, but we thought it would be best just to cast a wide net and put it out there and see what interest there was. And I think it's a decent practice, for what it's worth.
So can we define the process so we're clear on what that's gonna be?
Well, it's good, having not done it before, well, I think the select board has done it. I recall seeing a message on a webpage that there was an opening.
What we did, we set a defined period of an opening, you know. I think the first time it was 2 weeks, and then I think we extended it, actually. I don't think we had any interest in the first 2 weeks, to be honest with you, Kim, so. So you could pick whatever the magic date is. I mean, you might want to figure out what your schedule's gonna be too. But, you know, I don't think it's out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you're gonna need time for, I would say that all the folks that sign up should have an opportunity to come before the budget committee and make their case. And that's the fair thing, I think that's right, it's a fair thing to do. And you all, in an open meeting, will elect whoever you want to elect.
So an
It's up to
interview
you all.
process by the budget committee and then a voting process?
I'm sorry.
Interview process by the budget committee and then a voting process?
I think that makes sense, so everybody understands who's coming forward.
You want them to send an email like we got on the select board?
Yeah,
Like
but-
why you wanted to run?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think if you.
So we're not here all night talking
Yeah.
to 10
Right,
people.
no, I would have-
10 people.
I think it'd be awesome if you had 10 people actually sign up, to be honest with you.
Especially if one was the secretary.
Yes, that would. Yeah, I agree.
I had two thoughts, and we could add others, but one would be why you're interested in joining the budget committee, and the second would be, you know, what do you think what would you bring to the budget committee? Whether it's an experience, you know, your professional background, whatever it is. There might be other, you know, that's all I can think of. If anybody else has other thoughts, but that's what I would put out in the email, is if you're interested, show your interest, explain why and what you bring.
I think that's fine, and I think, you know, once we get, once the period is closed, then we can send all of us all of the material, because I assume it's going to come in either by email or with paper, and somebody can, you know, town administrator staff can copy it and send it off to us in PDF. I think that's a good approach. I mean, those are the two most important questions, and, you know, people will either expand upon it as they will or not, and that will tell us something.
And so we would do that, they would apply in our next meeting, they'd come in, we'd give them a chance to speak, answer those questions in person, answer any questions that the committee has, and then vote.
I mean, we'd ask them to leave at that point, so it's not awkward, but.
Right.
I mean, I suppose we could modify the process if we have 100 responses, but I don't think any of us are expecting that. So I think it's gonna be manageable, and if not, you can call a meeting and we can try to hammer it out something that makes sense. Is that?
Makes sense to me.
reasonable?
And would you feel that, how does the committee feel that the next meeting, which would be normally our first quarter budget review meeting, would that be too long to wait, or should we try and do something before then? And when is the first quarter usually available to review?
So usually, it's been at the beginning of May,
Yeah,
so,
so I thought,
I've been moving around with a possible schedule that it's not for us to talk about, but when I looked at past, last year's, it was, I think, the second in May, so.
so if we got on it right now, advertised tomorrow, could give 2 weeks, and then by early May when we meet again,
Yeah.
we can have that, those interviews and make a selection.
Well, maybe on the 24th, and then on the 1st of May, you'd have a full committee.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Jody.
Sorry, the 24th is 3
May?
weeks away,
Oh, April.
April.
Right,
And then interview them that day and appoint that day, and then they'll be
And
ready
they're-
for the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's to do it faster and get it done, so they can be part of it from the beginning.
yeah. That makes sense. So that's.
Does that give enough time for people to respond?
Oh, wait, because we'll likely get people who already ran, maybe there'll be some others, but,
You know, just to put out, being new here, I think one of the advantages of that approach is you're gonna find some other, you know, I don't wanna live here, but suspects, it might be great for other things too. And obviously, if somebody comes up and they're willing to spend time on doing something like this, they're probably very much willing to do something else. And I've always found that if you ask people, if you know that they're willing, you just have to ask if people will go and volunteer stuff. So I think that's another positive of this approach.
build a volunteer pool.
Yeah.
It certainly is not we certainly don't have an overwhelming
Yeah.
pool of volunteers. There are a lot more positions in town that we need people for, so you're absolutely right, Jerry.
I can't help but think that anybody who was serious about it would have run.
I may get that, Kim, and I think there's some validity to that, for sure. But I think what John was saying, and George, too, I mean, Charlie rather was saying, it changes, you get a different job, and all of a sudden you got more free time, you wanted to do it, you couldn't do it. Life doesn't change, so you never know. You may be absolutely right, it could just be the 3 people that ran, and you're gonna choose, that's who you're gonna choose from, but it doesn't hurt to cast a wide net and ask, of the 3 of them, it's input things, who knows, you never know.
Well, that's a process that I support. I'm getting a sense that there's a general consensus on that. Do we want to vote on it, or do we want to just take it as a general consensus and we'll set up a meeting for the 24th?
I think the consensus is fine, but I think if you're gonna do it this way, then I think it should be written out for the future in the guidelines, because I thought it was. But it's not.
It was an unwritten guideline.
Can I say something
Suzanne?
about guidelines? Actions of prior budget committees. The budget committee that worked on those guidelines is not this budget committee. And so the actions of prior budget committees do not hold any sway with the current committee. Now, this committee could read them, they're many, many, many pages long, and adopt it. But right now, this budget committee, this one, that was just recently constituted, has no guidelines. And as, the RSS say that it's our, we have the ability and the duty to fill any, to appoint to any vacancies.
Yeah, it would be a responsibility as a board, board to re-adopt or amend or change whatever, you do, or not adopt if that's what you wanted to, your guidelines. We're supposed to do that as another thing on my long agenda that I need to put for the next meeting. We're supposed to do the same thing, actually, so.
That will probably happen right behind the job descriptions.
Yeah, well, yeah, probably.
Elected officials don't really have job descriptions.
Are we still on that?
All right. So we will set a meeting for the 24th. We'll get an advertisement out, hopefully as soon as possible. Hearing the town administrator and McCormick will help us with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. With that, I think we can move on to the next item. next item, open hearing.
Could we go back to number
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, we
two?
can go on that.
Because we really need to name the committee at our next board meeting, which happens to be next Thursday. And so if we had a volunteer tonight, that would be ideal.
I mean, I don't mind doing that. I know my wife has volunteered for it. I don't know if that's if you wanna have that situation. I don't know if anybody's talked to her or anything, but, so I'll put my name out there if it's okay, that if Shelley is still gonna be on it, that I'm there as a representative of the community.
I don't see a problem with
That's up to the school,
All right, that's what I was thinking too.
up to the school board.
it.
We can only decide what we can decide. It's up to them to decide whether or not they're gonna.
Is
It's
it-
in a
Should be a
board
public
or not, so-
member,
As far as I know, yeah. I
Yes,
think
and then
that
you'd be
should
a budget
apply.
committee member.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but it's a really important, I don't know, just speak big, but it's a really important committee. I mean, this is a pretty big deal that the mayor Summersworth has foisted upon us, so.
Is anybody else interested in that? So, hearing none, I guess, check, we can just check to see that that's okay.
That's
And
fine,
Joe Desch would be the representative on
great.
the school
Good luck,
district
Joe.
committee.
Thank you. No, it's gonna be a lot of fun, actually.
And after softball season, I can be alternate.
She might make a
Not till
different
after
idea,
July.
maybe fun, she thinks that's gonna be fun.
It's going to be interesting.
There you go, for sure.
Okay.
Give something else for my wife and I to do together. maybe,
Yes.
so.
Really romantic.
Date night.
Right.
Take- Well, at least twice a month right there.
At least you're not doing opposite things. You both have to do it, so. Moving on to the budget committee schedule, and Suzanne has done some proactive work pulling together a potential schedule for our meetings. I think the idea was, and I'm on board with it, is to try and move the process a little bit earlier if we can, so that we're not at the very end like we were this last time, still trying to figure out what the tax impact was and things like that. And I think with SB 2, we didn't really adjust, I just took the schedule that was from the years before and went forward, and so that cut a few weeks off. And so I think Suzanne has put together a proposed schedule. It's just draft, it's something to consider, but if you want to,
Yeah, I'll pass it out and tell you what the thought was in my doing. So this came from my own head. Anybody who saw my brochure or listened to any of my things, this was something that I was really interested in doing, and that is making having a start earlier in the budget process so that we were making our lives easier at the end. And so, and John had a really good format that I just took, and I started out just noodling, and then I said, oh, let me just see what it looks like. So what you can see if you look through is that all of our meetings prior to the public hearing take place before the holiday season. So that December 18th would be the last date of the budget committee before the public hearings. So that was a driving force. And then as far as where the pieces are as we start to review budgets, I changed them only in so much as I tried to push first some of the larger departments or the things that we might want to spend more time on, such that if we look at them in one meeting and we come up with a question in meeting two later, we still have time to get back to that department head to try to get more feedback if the budget committee wants more feedback. So that, in essence, was really what I did. And I also added on the back page, on the second part, in those cases where they were dependent upon dates, I actually, and you had started to do this, John, so I added it to some others. You know, it says exactly what the RSAs say, or what the DRA tells us, like it's between this Monday and that Monday. And I will point out that I have some, well, let me say also that this was not in last year's, but near the bottom, it's the last day to post the town and the school warrant, and up above it, the last day for the budget committee to deliver the signed budget and warrant article recommendations. So that's our deadline, it's January 23rd, and by that time, we need to have signed budgets given to the select board, the school board, et cetera, and we were late this year. We did not meet the 2019 deadline, we were a day late. And so had there been a bond, there wasn't, but had there been a bond, that action of being late would have nullified the bond, we would not have been successful with the bond. So I thought it was important that we have these dates. These are RSA mandated dates, and we really need to keep to them, especially if there are items like bond warrants that depend on this. And the third to the last item, the deliberative session for the town, it has the snow date of February 11th. And I've highlighted it because that's outside the sessions. And John, you said you had checked with the
I did, actually, last year when I was doing this, it was the same issue, because you have basically Saturday to Saturday, 2 Saturdays and a time in between them to do your SB2 deliberative sessions. And so if we wanted to have, as we had done for town meeting and for school board meeting, school meetings, we did them on Saturdays. And if we wanted to do that, we were basically in the window, the only window that's available under the SB2. So I sent an email out and I forwarded it to the budget committee who was on at the time.
I was probably on it, but
No,
it wasn't important then.
you were, I think
Yeah,
Denise
already
was
gone.
by then, yeah. But basically, I can find the email, but it was from the attorneys at the Municipal Association. And they said, as long as it's, the scheduled date is within those timelines, and she explained why she had that opinion, then it was fine. A snow date that goes beyond was not gonna cause a problem for us. So we can do the Saturday and Saturday, and if there's a snow date and it's outside that window, that doesn't, that was her conclusion and opinion. So I can find that email and circulate it again so everybody sees
Does
it.
someone have to open the meeting though and recess it? So in other words, if we have it scheduled for Saturday, which is within the dates,
Yeah.
does someone have to come in, open the meeting, and recess it to the following Tuesday? Is that what makes it legal?
Yeah, we didn't, it had to do with it being like an unplanned circumstance, like a weather thing. It wasn't related to, there was no discussion of opening and then closing,
I would hate, I guess I would hate
to miss the
to
date.
miss it, because if a bond warrant were important, and so, I mean, I'm wondering maybe even, I don't know, maybe the DRA, maybe the bond tax.
I think this is wonderful. I think this is great. I mean, it would certainly help the select board, I can tell you that much, having things pushed up. I think we're all still trying to learn our way around the newer system. The only thing is that the deliberative sessions will be set by the school district, by the school board and the select board, not by the budget committee, just throwing that out there.
Okay, and
We'll be
that's
picking the date for when the deliberative session will be.
understood, that's fine. So, but nonetheless, it has to be,
Between
the
those,
school and the select board have to do it between 2/1 and 2/8.
Yeah, right.
So we can, this is on the budget committee directory on Google, and I can just go in and highlight those and
Perfect.
say.
I think everything is
Yeah,
perfect. I just want to
just-
make sure there's no misunderstanding
Yeah.
by anyone.
And thank
That
you for
we
saying
need to
that.
set the,
Yes.
No, we had the same understanding last time. We put it up there as a, here's what seems to fit. And it's a piece of, it's a tool that can help select board as well.
So what I can do is highlight it and say that it's set, I'll include the language that says it's set,
Just so-
yes.
the school board was very gracious at the select board the last time around, because we hadn't been through it and they had, and we were stepping on their toes, selecting the day they wanted, so, anyways.
Oh, yeah, we ended up swapping the dates.
Right, yeah, we have to, right?
And that, right, and the same thing can happen now if the two bodies want to,
Sure. Other than that, I think it's great.
pick straws or whatever.
Yes, I think it would be helpful for everybody having it.
I got one question. On October 16th, is the town gonna have enough time to have their quarterly reports ready by the 16th of October? Rather than the 23rd?
It represents, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you it represents the third Wednesday of the month, and so,
Is there any reason why we can't move that to the 23rd? Give the town more time?
well, that's also when the departmental budgets, what the schedule is saying, so we can check in with the town, Mike, And
And
then-
it's always good to have more time for everything, so I don't know. Who knows what
So,
the month will look like, but I think Carly's probably right.
That doesn't
Nice
give
to
them
have
much
more
time.
Right.
normally, we get it, the budget committee's been getting it the Friday before we look at it, right? So if we did it the 18th. Well,
We
we'll
still
have
gonna
to
have that
check,
same
yeah,
policy
yeah.
of getting our budgets on the Friday before.
I think that's the good practice, so that we all can see
Oh,
it.
just checking,
Yeah, it's not our.
see if policy changed.
It's not up to us, it's, we can ask for it.
It's our request for the
Yeah.
budget to be handed, so we can look at it.
Can't imagine we wouldn't honor that request, but, I mean,
It's just a matter of whether there's enough time, it's trying to.
Right. right.
So can we have the board and the town administrator look at this and see if it's legal?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if the select board looked at it too, only from the perspective of exactly what Charlie just brought up, you know, will use days work with staff, making sure they have enough time to get things done.
Thanks, Mike. Vern?
Your May 1st meeting, the quarterly review, is that not also the same day the school's having its withdrawal committee meeting? And you would therefore lose Mr. Desch?
Yes,
Yes.
it's a good catch.
And I'm sure he's dying to see those first quarter
And
points.
also, the school board member will be gone,
They're salivating him.
No, because she's not on the committee.
so she'd wanna know.
So May 8th?
I would imagine she could come to this.
May 8th is fine with me.
I'm sorry.
If we have to just,
Because that one's probably one that we want to answer today, or? That's
yeah,
the
we
only
want,
one, yeah.
we do want to answer that one today.
Yeah,
Sure, that's the most pressing, so.
So,
I don't see anything on the town's calendar that would say that there's something else going on right now, so.
May 8th is okay with me, and everybody else have a, let's have our next meeting on May 8th, let's make that, well, no, our next meeting is gonna be on the 24th,
right.
and then our quarterly review meeting would be on May 8th.
So we'll need the budget by the 3rd.
Yes.
Do we want to just keep the current third quarter review, or do we want to bump that?
I thought we were getting feedback from the town.
We'll get feedback from the town on that, so we're leaving that one for now.
My only concern is in December on the 18th. That's mine and my husband's birthday. And it's also the final operating budget. So, I love you all.
What
but-
better place to spend your birthday than if you do a birthday than?
That'll be a fun time.
It's a date night for Joe and his
Yeah,
birthday.
So what date was that, Jordy?
The 18th.
18th.
So if you'll see, these are, if the 11th and the 18th are actually the same meeting. And so there are two slots for it in case
Yeah, I'm assuming we're gonna need that.
we've not needed to, but it's there in case we do, or in case we start to lose patience with one another, and somebody says, maybe we should come back next Wednesday.
Well, we had, I think, 2 extra
Last,
meetings.
you were here last year.
We had 2 more meetings even after
Oh, I
the
see,
holidays
all
last
right,
time.
they were necessary, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
They were, yeah. I mean, hopefully there won't be.
So that'll be our push.
Realizing the goal is to get this done before the holiday, if it got pushed, because we got a hearing, we have a hearing on the 11th. I think we met like the 2nd or something like that last year. If we had to, we could, I mean, if something,
There's time the following week even, I mean, it's Christmas week, but
right,
there's time.
okay. Again, we're just taking this under advisement at this point. If anybody has other questions or thoughts at this point, but we can we can finalize
Well,
it.
we might possibly know, like at that first meeting, you know, depending on how far we get, like at the 12-11 meeting, if we need to start scheduling,
Well, that's what we ended up
Right.
doing, yeah,
Yeah.
so we realized we needed more
so.
time.
I mean, would you find last year, I mean, this is a new process for people, but if we're starting these things earlier in the year, I mean, wouldn't the hope be that that fourth quarter one is more of a final review and all the hard work's been done versus waiting until December?
You guys are talking about two different items.
I thought we were talking about the budget reviews and the,
Right. Your budget review of a quarter is different than next year's budget finalizing.
okay, and that's a question I don't know where I'll fit that in, but
Joe, maybe this is help, I'm sorry, you're off.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that the process of reviewing budgets for, let's say, 2019, but also working with the departments and prepping them for 2020 can still be done earlier. I mean, I think, you know, we should have a pretty good idea of what our costs are gonna be for 2020 as we move through 2019. There's not a lot of variability in the budget, that's why. Just saying,
Usually, the way the departments, the way I understand it, I'm so familiar from only one experience, but, is that they're really getting their budgets together by this time. And sometimes, like for the, you know, the water and sewer district needed more time for an engineering report, so.
yeah.
So there's, I'm a little, I'm not concerned, but I would be cautious that this is pushing the process forward for the town folks and whether they can get everything done in time. And it's not up to, you know, it's not up to me, but it just can they get their budgets in earlier? It seems like maybe it's just a last minute itis and the date's here, so you don't do it till the end, but it seems like they're pretty busy, and it's a crunch. Maybe our town administrator give us a sense for how hard that push is for the budgets from the departments. Is it?
It's gonna be an adjustment, and I'm sure it will be difficult for them, but it's going to have to happen in order for us to meet these deadlines. So, we're just gonna have to work with them on that. But I would, to that end, and Mr. Desch's comment, this board has typically had 2018 final or nearly final figures by the time they are deliberating on the operating budget for the subsequent year. And that's not gonna be happening this year, as you're seeing from your schedule, and that's gonna be necessary. So, you know, I can't predict how current your financial reports will be that you'll have to review by that time, but it may be only as good as, 10 months into the year, or third quarter. So we're gonna have to, as a group, get used to making information, making projections only on third quarters, but also using previous year data and less data in the current year.
I think as you get more familiar with the process, and we, it took us 100+ years to get it right into the old system, so it will take you a number of years to get it right under the new system. So departments will just have to get used to it, and the budget committee and the select boards of future will have to get used to dealing with historic data and current data and knowing they're making the best projections they can. That's just how it's gonna have to be. I think. This is very helpful though, because it's someone who most of us went through this process last time. It was newer, not so much maybe for you all because you've been dealing with the school side, but for us it was different. And we weren't as quick as we probably should have been. We were probably operating too much in the old model and thinking we had more time and we really didn't. So I think this is very helpful. And the department heads will have to get their budgets in a heck of a lot earlier than this because they're going to be getting them with the select board, so we can formulate for them and send it on to you also. Budget work's going to start in the middle of summer now.
Okay.
Just a comment, I mean, isn't the school doing this all along? Don't you have to be a year and 6 months?
Yeah.
So,
We're just not used to it.
yeah,
That's fine. It's just a little bit of change,
Yeah,
that's
it's
all.
change.
Just make sure that the department heads know that it's, they gotta be a little quicker, a little sooner. And I agree, it makes sense to me that we start earlier and that we're not crunched at the end. And like you said, the school board's been done it for years. for the town council. Any other discussion about the schedule, proposed schedule? It's the things that we have set in stone are the meeting on the 24th and the meeting on the 8th.
I'll just add that I have some changes to make based on this discussion, and I will amend the document and send everybody the link. You should all have access to that folder, so you can take a look at it and continue to make suggestions, comments, and the like.
John, I'll let you know after Monday if the board, select board has any changes they would like to see.
And that, I think we worked our way through the agenda. Does anybody have any other business that they'd like to bring up this time?
I mean, I guess I do. I'm not sure if it's business as much as me getting an understanding of the process. So I like the quarterly reviews. I think those are helpful. I'm not sure if I see much variability from year to year on what the different departments' budgets are. That's why I think we can probably be pretty on board with them. You know, what I did see though was, the budget number and the actuals for 2019 were typically less than what was budgeted. So, and that's a good thing. That means the departments are managing the money pretty well. But there are a couple things. One is, and Mike, I'm not sure if this is the select board piece, but there's this lapse of appropriations where, the budget is this much, expenses are this much, what's left over goes into some general fund. And I guess the question is, how does that get allocated within the current budget? I mean, Suzanne, that's what I'd asked you a while, and you said it was like about $1 million or so. So, in the training and stuff, it talks about it being, maybe you really only need to keep, 7 to 15% of that.
Right, so it goes into fund balance for
Right,
for a host of reasons. But,
right.
Yeah, it's up to the select board,
Okay, so-
whoever they are, to set what they believe the percentage should be. And I would say that this board hasn't made any decisions on fund balance yet, but the past boards have been very conservative, and rightfully so, in what they keep in fund balance. For a whole host of
Okay,
reasons.
but it's a select board.
Yeah, they handle that, but, yeah. And a portion goes into fund balance, another portion goes into, help me save me from myself, what's it called, the offset taxes, the overlay.
Overlay, it's something that goes into overlay, but overlay chews up whatever fund balance it needs in order to.
So it can go into two different sort of pockets, not pots, let's call it that, not pockets.
So after,
George sort of terms, but, yeah.
And just quickly, I just threw that overlay, but it's what is used, it's where the state wants us to account for any abatements that are made in property taxes. That's the
okay.
sensitive.
And then I guess the other thing, as far as the department heads, comes back to, the general guidance that we give them, right? Does the budget committee give the department heads the guidance? In other words, could we say to them, you know what your actuals were for 2018? Well, I'm sorry, you're gonna know you know what your actuals are for 2018. You're gonna have a pretty good idea of what 2019 is. You're gonna have an idea of what is gonna be really some excessive expense above what your prior one is. But you have to keep it into your current expenses, or your actuals, and then justify in these meetings, when we review the 2020 budget, justify why the expense for the next year is X number of dollars above the prior. So I'm just saying that if we give them guidance ahead of time, there's less surprises and less battles as you go toward the end of the year and putting together the 2020 budget.
You're not gonna have a battle with department heads, you're gonna have a battle with the select board. You shouldn't have a battle in general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're giving guidance to the select board, who has agency to move money around.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you're right. If you're talking about specific, because we're a bottom line, we give a bottom line budget at the end of the day, but it's not we do look at individual departments and we do make decisions on what we're going to add or cut based on those department line items. So I think having that, having some guidelines or guidance for the department heads would be helpful. I think that would be, that would help us all, just be more on top of it, rather than just someone comes in and starts talking about what they need, and the rationale sometimes is very strong and well-reasoned, and sometimes it's less well-reasoned, and so I think it would be good to give guidance so it's all well-reasoned and fits that model.
I agree with both of you, and I think that in the past, some of us have tried to have some of these maybe higher level conversations earlier on in the season, so that, you know, both the governing bodies as well as the budget committee have some sense of where things are going. So the sooner we can find out if there's anything unusual going on, then we can wrap our heads around that. But I would like to see us maybe provide some, just a guidance, you know, whether it's, look, we think, here's how budgets have been, you know, we'd like to see, unless there's something strange and unusual, maybe we stay within a 2% overall, you know, something like that. That would be within our purview. It would just be a guideline, and say, hey, but here's, if you the governing bodies, when you come back to us, if you've got something that's different from that, you know, we're gonna look at it.
Right. I mean, we still have the bottom line,
Yeah, but, right.
but we have to figure out where that bottom line comes from. Jody, sorry.
I have to disagree with you, because we sat together, and if the budget committee were to came to us when we created our budget as a select board, you were like, no, this is our budget that we're presenting to the budget committee. It's the select board's budget that gets presented to the budget committee. The budget committee doesn't tell the select board what to do. We can make cuts as a budget committee later, after they, I keep forgetting that I'm not part of that again. And I think that's one of the things that you'll find out, now that you're not a select board member, that it was hard to take a step back. It was hard.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we.
But when it was us,
For example.
you would not have allowed that. It is Mike's,
Actually, as
Denise's,
the ex
and
officio board member, I tried to have high-level conversations with the budget committee about where they thought, you know,
Yeah, it's guidance,
So
it's
your
not.
recollection might be different.
I was there making them, as the,
So-
you weren't here, I was here.
Right now, it's Mike, Denise, and Miles. So it's their budget that they will present to us, and we make recommendations after that. If you think the budget committee should go to the select board and say, keep it within this.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. So we don't have to
That's-
continue with that conversation.
Okay.
That wasn't, you know, a guideline or an idea or something for a group.
It's an
To work
idea,
on.
I
It's
think, to me, it seems like it's a little more proactive than reactive, rather than, wondering how the budget committee is gonna react to a budget. There's a heads up that, hey, we're really looking to keep it at 2% or something like that, or less, or whatever it is we decide. That's a good heads up to have. I mean, it's not us, it's not for our place to say what the select board budget is, that it is what it is. But we're gonna eventually review it and recommend or not recommend, or suggest cuts or whatever. So I think it's a little more proactive. It doesn't have to be, you must take this amount out of this.
Right.
So I think we're saying the same thing, basically.
I'll take it under advisement.
Any other, Joe, do you have any other? Charlotte?
I got a comment. Okay, on here we go, on April 24th, say we have 0 or 1 candidate. Are we still gonna come in and meet for the 1 candidate or 0 candidates for the budget committee's position?
If you need to come down both scenarios, to be honest, Charlie. And you need to vote to elect the person, but if you don't have anyone, you gotta come back and decide, okay, what the heck are we gonna do next, so. I'm just one more step, so.
Yeah, I think we have,
No, could we plan something else that night?
Oh, I see what you're saying,
I mean, we're all gonna be here. change the
See if there's
bylaws.
any-
Could work on that.
We don't have bylaws.
You mean the guidelines?
The guidelines,
You could-
sorry
No,
for mine.
You could work, I mean, I'm not the chair, so not a bad suggestion.
I guess what I had difficulty with the guidelines coming in, looking at, for a couple of reasons. I felt that they overstepped what the budget committee has authority to do. They had things like, you know, what goes as a capital expense and what's not a capital expense. They had a lot of reiteration of stuff that's in the RSA, so that wasn't necessary, and a lot of stuff about Robert's rules. I think, in my understanding, I asked why we developed the guidelines in the first place. It was really to give the new budget committee chair a sense of what they need to do, and not necessarily to be rules that we need to follow. That was how it was explained to me, at least in that budget committee meeting. And to me, and we talked about it, and Bill Irving had suggested he would take a cut at it. Didn't come to pass, but would be more of a, almost like a checklist of things that you've gotta do. Like, you've gotta start off with your schedule. You've gotta elect, you know, you gotta elect your chair. But I don't think, as Suzanne said, you can adopt things that are for the next committee to come in. So if you said, well, the committee chair is gonna be the chair until the next, you know, after the election, until the next meeting, can't really say that, because that's not really in our purview. It's a new budget committee, we don't have authority over it.
Those
So-
guidelines came from another town, other towns do this, so perhaps it'd be worthwhile to check with other towns and see how they adopt them, and if they re-adopt them every time.
Yeah, I guess there would be a lot of work to go through them to get them to a point where I would feel, myself would feel that I should vote on them.
We don't need new rules, we're good, we got balance there,
I'll go with it.
yeah.
So anyway, yeah, right, it's I just felt there's a lot of work to do to them, and it seemed like there's a lot already defined in the RSA that to follow, but it's been almost a year now since I reviewed them carefully, so that's where I came out. I think if we wanted to do that, we'd have to go through a process of circulating guidelines and reviewing them as a group, and I'm not proposing that we do that, but if floor's open, if somebody wants to make a suggestion.
I can see us having a handbook, you know, something that is helpful, you know, sort of just procedurally.
And that's what we talked about.
Yeah, I thought Bill, is that what you just said? Bill did volunteer to try to drag something.
And then you went and resigned,
Does
so.
the municipal association not have?
Yeah, there's the handbook, yes, there's the that's the link right here.
Right.
The basic law of budgeting,
Right,
which tells budget committees a lot of things,
right.
but it's also voluminous. So if you had like a one-page thing that
Which I'm
says,
asking, I guess my question was,
you know, just a one-page
Do
thing
they
that
have-
says,
Do they not have a one-page?
You know,
They really
this-
can, you need to have guidelines, you need to have rules. So, you should, I mean, I think that makes sense. Now, is it the ones that you have currently? I haven't read them. I
Something
don't-
like this?
I don't know. That is what's come from the municipal system, but it, like Suzanne said, it is rather lengthy, so.
Yeah, it is.
But, I mean, you do have the statute, you do have Robert's Rules of Order, which is a guide for meetings. At the very least, a checklist or something, I think would be a bad thing to do, or your board rather to do, but, I mean, I see value in having guidelines, but again, I'm not the one who's been drafting them for you, so it's easy for me to say that, but it's time off that you all have to work on it. Other towns have developed them, not every town has them. When I served on the budget committee many years ago, it was like the Wild Wild West. I mean, there was no consistency, the chair didn't know what he was doing, and didn't care to try to get to know what he was doing. So, it wasn't the best process to govern the town by, so, and other towns have decided they should have them, so. I think it's worth your time looking into it, but, again, I'm not the one drafting them, so.
I think that's where we come down to, if we had a guideline that had the things that we need to do, but was less of a prescriptive didn't overlap or step on things that were actually a select board.
Right. The takeaway, though, John, honestly, has to be that one board can't bind the next board's hands. I mean, each board really should be adopting their guidelines every year. Just like the select board, we have guidelines for welfare, we have guidelines for policy, for purchasing policy, those things, those should be adopting those every year. Getting welfare now, we'll work on the next one, but I mean, you can't tie the hand of the next board, so. I agree with both, how's that? For my song and like stands.
That's the basic guideline right there. So, we don't wanna go by it, we don't.
Do they have, is that from the municipal association?
Yes, it
Charlie?
is.
They have one, so, there you go. So if you have, if you look at it and it seems to make sense for, if that's what the Rollinsford Budget Committee wants to have as their set guidelines, then that's what you should have
You
done.
should have it from the last meeting last
Why
year.
not?
We've discussed this last year and the year before.
He wasn't here though, Gerald.
I know he wasn't, but he was here last year,
No, he wasn't, he just got elected in March.
talking, he said,
But
But
Joe's
Joe was asking if he could see it, so he wants to look at it.
It's not from the municipal association, is it? The basic law of budgeting is from the municipal association.
Are you talking about the handbook or the guidelines
I
that
don't
were
think I know what you're
circulated?
talking about at the moment.
yeah,
Oh, no, those were modeled after the town of Brentwood.
yeah, I know, but we adopted it.
So it's
That's
a
Bill,
starting
that's
point.
Vern's version, and this is Bill's version. We talked about it for 2 years, and
Is there an electronic copy of the latest one? I'd like
Did I
to
say that? I can tell you whether or not it's the most updated one.
I've got an electronic copy that has red lines in it.
No,
Yeah.
this is not the most updated.
probably isn't the most updated,
No,
it was the most updated we had.
But as a new committee, you should have the opportunity to update them if that's what you want to do. I mean, I'm again, just one person.
I have the version that has the dates that were changed, they're in a different color, they're in blue, and they have the dates
That's helpful.
that they were changed
Where would you find that?
on my
Burn
computer.
titles.
No, Bill Irving sent it out. Bill
Okay.
Irving sent it to the budget
Yeah,
committee.
Yeah, I can send it.
the first organizational meeting, and, yeah, I'm willing, I think that we can take a look at them and discuss them if we don't have any candidates and we have time, on the 24th, forgetting which date it is, then yeah, we should talk about it.
That's the roundabout point I wanted to get to.
Good, I'm glad we got there. Any other business or questions?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Do I have a second? You have a second?
Oh, second.
Second, all in favor?
Good luck.
See you on the 8th. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Good timing, Celia.
Treasurer's report, sorry. It's not today. I don't send it today or yesterday.
We need to.
Finally got to start on
And we are,
I'm thinking.
So if they're really just for information, they're like, they're quarterly meetings, and then it gets really intense about the fall. That's all right. And then there are a couple of Saturdays. And then discussion about those. Just so you know what the. I will.
I didn't know you were sitting here until somebody referred to you.
Good job.
I'm going to grab Stella right now, but
This
is
The biggest bar.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you. Stella's bestie, Shane's bestie, come on.
Yeah, there we go.
Hi, here, yeah. Yes, thank you so much for volunteering.
I've never hated, but I've seen about it. Good, glad I made the track. Thank you.
I will be there tomorrow.
Well, that's why I think just.
You got an extra card? You're just getting that one, you won't have to come over? It's up to you.
Oh, you don't want to see me?
You can come over. You can walk.
Well, wait, I still got. We're all on the same page as far as.